Today, I'm at the Age of Sail Heritage Museum here at Port Greville, Nova Scotia, and I'm speaking to Aurélie Aubin, who is the Executive Director at the museum.
Hi, Sandy. Welcome.
Thank you, Aurélie. Now, perhaps you could tell me a little bit about the history of the museum, how it came about, and more importantly, what you do here at the museum.
I'd love to tell you, Sandy. Our museum's opened 29 years ago. It was built and created by the inspiration of the local people who wanted to see their ancestors and heritage celebrated. So we started off with this building that we're in right now, which is the 1854 Methodist Church, and it was taken apart and relocated here and designed for our museum. Over the years, we've slowly added more and more buildings. We have the original Port Greville Lighthouse here from 1908. We've built a boat shed. We've built a building we call the Wind and Wave Building, which is designed to look like an upside-down half model of a ship. We have an original blacksmith shop, and we also have a planer and work shed. So our museum is dedicated to the lumbering and shipbuilding history of this area and the families and communities that supported them. And we also have genealogy related to the shore and to those people, as well as an archives in our location.
So the primary industry here at that time would have been lumber and shipbuilding.
That's correct, yes. They actually built over 7,000 sailing vessels in the Bay of Fundy, and over 700 of those were built between Parsborough and Advocate, of a distance of about 56 kilometers.
So this would have been a very, very busy spot in the time.
Yes, at one time there were probably about 1,000 people along this shore.
So with these very large ships, these types of ships, would they have been fishing boats, schooners?
We're talking schooners and full-rigged ships. Actually, the largest ship built on the shore was in Spencer's Island. It was called the Glooscap, and it was over 17,000 tons. And a ton is equal to 100 cubic feet of cargo space. So we're talking a very large vessel.
So what would that carry?
Most of the ships from here carried lumber. That was the main export. They also, of course, Parsborough had the coal coming in from Joggins and Spring Hill, which was carried out by ship, and later on gypsum. And they would come back with all manners of things.
Now, Aurélie, perhaps you could tell me how you actually got involved with the museum.
Well, it was by accident, really. My parents were two of the founders of the museum, and my father was born and raised here on the shore, and our ancestors were shipbuilders and sea captains. And when he moved home, after being out west for 25 years, he was very disheartened to see that there was very little left to recall that history that he grew up with and was so important in his life. And so together with like-minded individuals from the community, they decided to start the museum. So at that time, I was in university and living out in Calgary, but I'd come home and help out at different functions and fundraisers they had. And eventually, I moved back to the community in 2000, and my father asked if I would help out at the museum, and I've just never left. And actually, it was after I had my own children that I kind of started to think about history and family and wanting to be closer to the family so that my children could grow up with grandparents in their life. So that's why I came back.
Now, I'm seeing a lot of tools and artifacts now. Were these donated by locals?
Yes, almost all of our artifacts are donated, and most of them are from locals or people with a local connection to the area. We have over 4,000 artifacts in the museum, and just about everything is on display. And we consider ourselves a hands-on museum, and the reason for that is that the people who have donated the items, especially things like the tools, they want the generations to actually know what it feels like to pick up and hold a hand plane or an as, not just see something behind glass.
Yeah, I do hope that children, or when they come in and they see that their ancestors, that despite all the hardships, that they still survive. And more importantly, I suspect that even though their lives were hard, they did find joy in small things.
I think you're right. I think they really did. And I think a lot of it is even that the pride they took in the work they did. I look at the tools, and then the photos of the beautiful vessels that they built with those tools. And you can tell that they took pride. They weren't just slapped together. I mean, you know, they were using teak and mahogany. These were working ships. There was no reason for that type of material to be used, but they took pride in it, and they wanted to be proud of that ship when it went into a port in whether it was England or the Orient. They wanted people to see those ships and know that, you know, Nova Scotia took pride in what they built.
And it also be a tradition here is you don't throw anything away.
That's right. That's very true. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that the Maritimes was a depressed area for very long, and people couldn't afford to throw things away. If it had a use, you kept it. And, you know, from my point of view as a museum curator, that's important because we wouldn't have the displays that we have if people did throw everything away. Nothing makes me sadder than having people come through the museum and hearing, oh, that's what that is. We found those in Grandpa's shed and we threw them out, and it just breaks my heart.
Well, Orly, they weren't very educated, most of these people, but they had a wealth of common sense.
Well, actually, Sandy, I think they were very educated. They were just educated in different ways. I think we don't always appreciate the knowledge that comes from skill sets and actually hands-on learning as opposed to book knowledge.
Well, Orly, I understand you have other artifacts here I'd like to have a look at, and I also understand that you have the remnants of a certain shipwreck.
Yes, we're very excited, Sandy. We have what remains of the Mary Celeste.
The ghost ship.
Yes.
I'd like to have a look at that.
I'd love to show you.
Let's go do it.
All right. So, Sandy, this is one of our most important and iconic displays, at least in my opinion. These are the remnants of the Mary Celeste.
I've heard of that ship, but I often heard it referred to as the Marie Celeste.
Actually, that was a mistake made by Sir Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes. He wrote a book about the Mary Celeste, and in it, he referred to the ship as the Marie Celeste. And over the years, because a lot of people had read that story, that's what it became known as. But its true name was the Mary Celeste. In fact, it was actually originally named the Amazon and was built just 15 miles from where we are right now.
And it was renamed. Now, my understanding with ships, it's bad luck to rename a ship, isn't it?
Well, not really. A lot of ships were renamed when they were sold under different owners. They like to name the ships after their family or somebody important to them mainly. And so the Amazon, as it was launched, was considered a bad luck ship to begin with because the first captain of it actually died before they ever left the bay and was brought back to Spencer's Island and died there. And so it carried on for several years as the Amazon and was eventually sold to an American firm who renamed it the Mary Celeste when they did repairs to it.
And when a ship like that gets the moniker or the tag as a bad luck ship, does it carry it with them when crews come on? Do they know about this?
Yes, it does. It certainly does. At that time, people were very superstitious, especially sailors, and they often had a hard time finding crews for the Mary Celeste. Over the years, from the history that I have learned, none of the owners of that vessel ever made any money actually on her. It sailed for quite a few years, and it wasn't until the big story of it being abandoned at sea that it really became well known, I guess, to people outside of the sailing communities.
And that's strange to have a ship abandoned and still afloat.
It is, and it was a really strange story. Apparently, everything except for the crew was essentially on the ship. The cargo hadn't been touched. The table was set for supper. The captain's coat was there. His family's belongings were there, but nobody on the vessel.
And is there any explanation? Did they ever come up with a reason why?
There's been so many stories, everything from krakens attacking the ship, pirates. But the most logical explanation to date is that because of the nature of the cargo, which was denatured alcohol and can be very volatile, that perhaps they had hit some squalls, and that perhaps the fumes from the alcohol had built up, and the captain, fearing an explosion, may have gotten the crew and his family into a lifeboat that broke away. But to this day, there's no concrete evidence because nobody was ever found.
Now, my understanding of the rule of, or the law of the sea is that if you find a derelict vessel like that, you take it in tow, it belongs to you.
Typically, that would be correct, Sandy. But when the crew of the Delgrada brought the Mary Celeste to port, they were actually arrested on charges of murder. And it actually took almost a year before those charges were stayed. It was a very, very strange time, and to find a ship with everything still intact was very suspicious. And so there was a long investigation, and it wasn't until after the crew was finally exonerated of the murder that the ship was released. And because of the nature of the investigation, they did receive a small amount, but not very much. And the ship was actually resold.
And then what happened to the ship?
Eventually what happened to it is she was destroyed off the coast of Haiti, and it was actually an insurance fraud that ended the life of the Mary Celeste. It was found that what they had listed as cargo turned out to be rubber boots and dog collars. And so even at that sad end, the insurance never paid out. So it still didn't have a lot of luck.
It boggles the mind. The ship's abandoned. Crew takes it in. They get arrested, charged with murder. They get out. They get a little bit of money. They rename the ship. The ship goes to Haiti, and then it's destroyed for insurance fraud.
Well, that's I think what makes the story of the Mary Celeste so interesting to people is all these things that happen to her over and over again. And it's a very interesting story because it's almost larger than life, really.
Now, you also have some artifacts that actually come from the Mary Celeste.
That's correct. Actually, in the early 2000s, Clive Cussler and John Davis, who is from Halifax, went on an expedition to find the remains of the Mary Celeste, because up until that time, she hadn't been actually discovered. And they were able to find it. And so at the time, it was quite big news and kind of faded into obscurity, as stories often do. And actually in 2021, John Davis was cleaning out a warehouse that he had in Halifax and discovered boxes of the remains of the Mary Celeste and decided it was time they came home. And so we were very fortunate.
Now, did any of the crew was never found?
To this day, they have never been found, and there is no clue as to whatever happened to them.
A great mystery, right?
It is a great mystery, and that's why we like to refer to it as a mystery ship, not a ghost ship. No ghosts have ever been heard from the Mary Celeste, but it is certainly a mystery as to what happened to the crew of that vessel.
Well, Orly, I want to thank you. It's been very informative, and I've enjoyed it immensely. Now, I also understand that you have a cafe here?
Yes, we do.
Well, I think I'd like to go and have a chat with Tom.
All right. Thank you so much for coming.
You're quite welcome. Maybe have a cup of coffee?
I think we could do that, yes.
Talk about the Mary Celeste.
Okay.
I'm speaking with Thomas Trenham, who is the treasurer here at the Age of Sail Heritage Museum. And perhaps, Thomas, you can give me some information as to how you got involved with the museum, what your background is.
Well, my background is actually in construction. So a lot of years ago, I decided not to be a fisherman like my father, and I went off to college and I became a carpenter. And then from that, I morphed into working for the municipal government as a building official who issues building permits and does inspections on buildings. Well, I've been there now for 35, almost 36 years, and I may have actually issued the building permit for this building to be put here. Well, a few years later, they put in the cafe. And so I would be driving by, and I stopped in, and I started having coffee, and I realized that this is a wonderful place. And in fact, at the cafe over there is probably one of my favorite places in the county to come and have a tea and a sandwich and look at the tide coming in and out. And so it wasn't too long. The curator's mother was trying to get me involved as a director, and then she kind of a few years ago talked me into becoming the treasurer. So I thought that's all fine and dandy. So she lived up the road here, only half a kilometer away, and I stopped in one day. She was giving me the paperwork and showing me how everything was working. And then she said, well, she's leaving. And I thought, oh my, you're leaving? You're dumping this job on me and you're leaving. So anyway, that's how I got involved with the museum. So I've been, I guess I've always been kind of dropping in for the last quite a few years, but actually only got involved actually on the board as a treasurer maybe 2 years ago.
Now, I understand, and in that cafe, they have a special club they have out there, a bunch of gentlemen meet.
Yes, I saw some of them today, and one of them I actually worked with many years ago, and I was surprised. I said, you're a part of this gentleman's club? And he said, yes.
So I imagine that with this museum, that some of the artifacts might strike a personal chord with you that you might have seen in your childhood.
Yes, in the museum, there's a kind of a setup of a keel and a mold. And the fishermen used to take these mold, or not the fishermen, but the boat builders, of which my uncles were, that's what they did, boat building. Among other things, they were fishermen as well. But they would get molds or make them, and they would set them, they would lay a keel, they'd know what the length of the boat is, and then they would set these molds along the keel. And of course, at the bow, it would be a narrow mold, and it would keep working back to the wider ones and then to the stern. And then when they started planking the boat, it would follow those molds, so that would be the shape of your boat. And then at the end of it all, the molds would be removed. I can remember my uncle going to the woods, and he would know in his mind where there was a specific tree that would make a bow, because it would be typically a large tree, and the root, for whatever reason, part of it would be sticking out of the ground, and so it would make a knee. So that would be the curve for the bow.
So they would go out and they would look specifically for things in the woods for the boats.
Yes, I suppose so. In my uncle's case, he actually had some woodland, and of course he would hunt once in a while, and I rather suspect he knew of most every tree that was suitable for that. And back in those days, if it was on your property, great, but if it was on the neighbor's property, that was fine too. It was only a tree. It's not like today where people are very possessive, even if they have 100 acres, that they'd be very possessive of one tree. And that was just the way of things. As a kid, we would go and make tree houses in the woods. We never worried about who owned the property. And we would be cutting down trees and making tree houses, and you know, the neighbors weren't chasing us out.
Yeah, you're right. I can remember that myself. We do into the woods and we do it. And it's an odd phenomenon because as you get older, you realize you don't really own anything, do you?
No, you don't.
It's strange how things have changed, because the age of sail now would have been shipbuilding, lumbering, the mines, and fishing. Now, those certainly the lumbering and the shipbuilding is in decline. So now it's changed, and now it's visitors who are coming here from 4 corners of the world to come here specifically because this is Nova Scotia and the history of the province.
Yeah, there's been some famous ships built around here, you know, not in this particular shipyard, but not far from here.
So here you can come for the artifacts, but stay for the stories, right?
Oh yeah, there's stories. I guess my father was a storyteller. Perhaps that's been passed down now.
Nova Scotia, we're full of storytellers, eh?
Yeah.
Well, Thomas, I want to thank you. It's been very informative, and I hope a lot of people will come and visit this wonderful museum. And I see a saw up on the wall there. Maybe I'd like to go and give shipbuilding a hook. You think you could show me a few things?
Well, I'm sure I could show you quite a few things just on the operation of the saw alone.
Okay. Well, let's go give it a try, eh?
Good.
All right.
We'll do that.
Cheers.
Cheers. Sandy, this is a crosscut saw, and as you can see, it's got a handle on each end, which means it has to be operated by 2 people. The teeth are sharpened in such a way that there is no forward or backward. There's just the raker teeth, which cleans the sawdust out, and then these ones do the cutting. And you got to run it in a rhythm.
All right.
It's also been known as the whip saw or the misery saw, because if you don't get in the right rhythm with your partner, the end will fly back at you, and you'll wear it somewhere on your body, and it will hurt.
Well, I hope you got rhythm, all right? Well, you know what? I've been thinking about shipbuilding, and I think maybe I'd like to build a ship, so let's give it a go.
Okay, well, I pull, and then you pull. I kind of pull. There, we got a rhythm going there right now. Look at that. There, see, I whipped it there?
You whipped it.
There. With a little bit of practice, we'd get into that in real good style, and we'd have that cut off in half the time.
Well done.
Thank you. Well done for you.
Mm-hmm.
We would actually make a pretty good team.
Yes, we would. Except don't ask me to go on a ship.
Okay. You get seasick?
I don't swim.
You don't go on a ship to sink.
Well, from what I've seen at this place, a lot of them do sink. Eh?
Yeah, well, you can fall overboard. That'll be the idea.
Oh, yeah, you're really cheering me up.
So, anyway,
Well, thank you, Thomas.
you're welcome.